May 12, 1989, Southern Pacific train MJLBP-11, better known as 7551 East, is preparing to depart Mojave Yard with 4 engines: SD40T-2 8278, SD45R 7551, SD45R 7549, and finally SD45T-2 and 9340. And at the back of the train were helpers SD40T-2 8317 and SD45R 7443. The train consisted of 69 hoppers loaded with trona. This train, although normally starting out like any other train, would soon come to a crashing end. The train left the yard at 12:16 a.m. with only 4 engines. The engines went to pick up their consist and rolled down Cajon Pass at about 5 a.m. SD45R 7551 was originally going to lead the consist, but the crew ran into some major problems with the engine, thus leading to 8278 leading the train. The crew was engineer Frank Holland, conductor Everett Crown, the brakeman Alan Reese was in 7549, and the helper engineer and conductor were Robert Waterbury and Lawrence Hill. Once the train reached the grade, though, trouble would begin. Although the crew suspected nothing wrong. At the yard, the wrong weight of the train was communicated to the crew. They were told that it was 6,151 tons, when it was actually 8,900 tons. This would play a major role in the accident. When they reached the grade, they had already done multiple brake tests and suspected nothing wrong with the train. However, while they were braking for the pass, they noticed that the train was slowly creeping up to 30 miles per hour. Frank Holland applies more braking, but the train continues to speed up. Eventually, the train's put into emergency, but that doesn't help either. The crew now realizes how dire the situation is. No matter how hard the crew tries, they can't seem to get their train to stop, and the brakes begin to burn up. 7551 East then begins to fly down the hill at insane speeds. The crew of the helpers has no idea what's going on. 7 Pacific 7551 East's crew then quickly gets in contact with West Colton Dispatch, informing them about their problem. The brakes were getting so hot that the wheels had begun to melt. Once the crew was in contact with West Colton and informed them about their problem, all they can do is hold on as their train flies down the grade at 90 miles per hour. For the crew, up ahead is a street called Duffy Street, right next to the train tracks, a community neighborhood. The train is right for it at 105 miles per hour. And now, 7:36 a.m., 7 Pacific Extra 7551 left the curve, and the 8,900-ton train flew into Duffy Street, destroying multiple homes as it derailed. Miraculously, Frank Holland, the engineer, was found alive in 8278, the lead unit. Unfortunately, Everett Crown and Alan Reed were crushed as the train derailed. But before investigation, more was to come. On May 25, 1989, at 8:05 a.m., a backhoe was cleaning up the spilled trona. Its arms struck a petroleum pipe operated by Kaunev, starting a fire, consuming more homes. In total, 2 7 Pacific workers and 4 San Bernardino residents were killed, and over $14 million were spent on repairs. The money was more on the fire, not the runaway. 8278, 7551, 7549, and 9340, along with all 69 cars, were scrapped. 8317ers and 7443 are still in service at 6202 and 5313-1, but this would not be the only runaway on Cajon Pass. On December 14th, early in the morning, in 1994, Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe PBHLA 1-10 was rolling down Cajon Pass with 4 engines and 48 cars. The lead engine was B40-HW576, behind was FP4596, F455976, and GP60M144, hauling 48 cars intermodal. In front of the train was Union Pacific CUWLA-10, with 3 locomotives in the lead and 2 engines in the back. On the head end was UP 9450, Union Pacific GE locomotives, 2 of them presumably, and 2 other locomotives in the back, with Union Pacific 3341 and Union Pacific 3354. The Santa Fe train tests its brakes, and everything goes smoothly, so it heads down the grade. Even though the train has tested its brakes, all of a sudden, it starts speeding up. And although the engineer applies braking, it keeps speeding up to 45 miles per hour, eventually being declared a runaway. He then tells the crew of the UP to get off, as he is kind straight for them, and of course, it's inevitable.
Come in, UP helpers.
Santa Fe Cajon dispatcher to Santa Fe 576 West, over.
Helpers, get off your train. You've got a train coming your way.
Santa Fe Cajon dispatcher to Santa Fe 576 West, over.
576 West.
Are you the one that's in emergency? Over.
Yes, we are.
What is your speed now? Over.
40, 50.
We're coming on out now. Let's get up to the speed. Let's go. Coal train helpers. Bail the power. Bail the power. Coal train is in emergency at Cajon. Despite both crews' efforts, there was no time to get out of the way or for the Santa Fe to slow down. The UP crew bailed first, and then the Santa Fe crew bailed just 1,500 feet from impact. It happened at 5 a.m. Emergency! There's a big ball of fire! Go ahead, over. Get an emergency person, as soon as you can. They just hit the rear end of this train. Is this the head end of 9450? It's the head end of 50, and we can see a ball of fire. Get some emergency personnel out here. Okay, we have emergency on the way now. Santa Fe PBHLA 1-10 has rear-ended UPCUWLA-10, burying the UP helpers and rupturing the Santa Fe units. Loads of intermodal cars flew off the tracks as well, crushing on top of one another. The UP crew was able to escape without injury since their train was stopped, but the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe crew suffered injuries while jumping from their train going at 45 miles per hour. The fire from the ruptured fuel tanks of the Santa Fe units was brought under control a few hours after the collision. The NTSB conducted an investigation on the scene and eventually came to a conclusion. They concluded that there was a blockage in the air hose that triggered the brakes between some freight cars on the Santa Fe. Through cars 4 through 8 and 10 through 11 did have their brakes working properly. Cars 5 to 7 had soft applications. Car 9 had brake shoes that didn't work, and cars 12 had limited braking, and one of the hoses had a leak. All Santa Fe units and 2 helper units were damaged beyond repair and scrapped, as well as some intermodal cars damaged. The UP units at the front were unharmed. Though there were no fatalities in the wreck, and the first wreck along Cajon Pass since 1989, 2 years later would eventually change it. On February 1st, 1996, Santa Fe HBALT 1-31 departed Barstow Yard at 1:14 a.m. The train consisted of 4 locomotives and 49 cars, each loaded. The lead locomotive was Santa Fe GP60M 157, and behind the GP38-2 3853, GP60B 342, and GP60 4031, hauling various freight of 49 cars. Like the other 2 trains, unfortunately, this journey would also not go as planned. This would be the ultimate downfall of the crew. a.m. HBALT 1-31 comes to a stop in Victorville, California for a brake test. The brakes were working just fine, like all the rest of the trains that ran away down Cajon. The train heads towards the grade. At 3:42 a.m., they reach the grade. The engineer starts to slow down the train. He notices it keeps creeping up to 30 miles per hour. He applies more braking, thinking it's nothing. But it increases to 40 miles per hour, then 45, then 50. He immediately throws the train into emergency, but eventually it gets up to 60. Now, the crew knows how bad the situation is. 2 out of the 3 of the crew members on the engine jumped. 1 died and 1 survived. The engineer hoped to ride it out and stayed in 157. And then he realized that there's a trestle bridge at Mappa 60.4. He feels 157 lean and ducks to the floor. And then comes the inevitable. At 4:10 a.m., it happened. At 4:10 a.m., a ball of fire can be seen in the distance. The entire train jumps the tracks into the dry creek bed, except for 4 cars. The engineer survives the crash with minor injuries. Sadly, the conductor died from carbon monoxide poisoning from the burning freight. The NTSB looked into the crash after the fire was put out. It was found that the cause of the crash was similar to the 1994 Cajon Pass runaway, a kink in the air hose. This caused not enough braking to be applied to each car on the train, thus leading to the train not being able to slow down or stop in time for milepost 60.4 in the dry creek bed near the Trestle Bridge. In the end, 157 was returned to service, and after the BNSF merger, which happened before the 1996 Cajon Pass runaway, was rebuilt into a GP60M-3. 342 was also rebuilt. Both are in storage of BNSF as of today. Unfortunately for 3853 and 4031, both were destroyed in the accident. Some people wonder, though, will there be a 4th one? What happens next on Cajon Pass? Well, even though there has been a train derailment on Cajon Pass lately, but was not a runaway, nobody really knows. Credit to Pacific Productions for the idea for this documentary in the first place, Thunderbolt 1000 Siren Productions for the crashing sound effects for Crash 3, and Fran the Train Fan 2995 for helping move the trains, as well as Moon Trains, better known as the Manual Boy, for voicing 576 West. I voiced the dispatcher and engineer of 9450 because I couldn't find many voice actors. Thank you to all the people that helped me. See you next time. Brandom out.